Good evening, everybody. This is the Iceman, Matt Freites, and this is the first ever installment of what we are calling Braves Talk. And for those of you who have never been here before, first of all, welcome. My name is Matt Freites, as I said earlier, and I am the host of Iceman and Coach, which is a podcast that I do with my friend and my partner, Brad Powell, who is on the other side here, who I'll bring him in a minute. So Brad and his dad, who are on camera over there, are big Bradley basketball fans. And for the last year or so, Brad has been tooling around the idea of doing some Bradley-specific content, and we at Iceman and Coach have also considered doing that for other localities. So tonight is the first ever iteration of this, and we're going to kind of stumble our way through it as we're here live. So I want to welcome in Brad and Rick Powell, who are basically, I don't know, Bradley super fans, whatever you want to call it, a familial thing. So first of all, welcome, guys. It's good to see you. Rick, I've actually never seen your face before, but Brad, I've seen you tons of times. I don't need to see that again. So anybody who's new here, though, if you want to stick around for some other content that we do, please hit subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe to us in any podcast app that you'd like, Iceman and Coach. So, fellas, let's get into it and talk some Bradley basketball. What do you think?
Iceman, dude, this has been, you and I have been talking about this, like you said, for a year, and I'm happy that we've got the opportunity to get this thing off the ground. And some of it's been just my natural hesitation because the folks that know Bradley basketball know it really, really well. And I mean, pretty much the entirety of my life, I've been a Bradley fan. And the interesting thing is, I'm not much of a basketball fan outside of Bradley. I mean, I enjoyed the NCAA tournament and all that stuff. I don't really watch the NBA. I couldn't tell you the last time I went to a high school game. I mean, it is very purely Bradley basketball, and I don't have a lot of playing or coaching experience in basketball. So I was a wrestler, football guy, all that stuff, as you know. And so I'm not like an X's and O's guy when it comes to basketball. I stumble my way through it as best as I can, but I'm a passionate Bradley basketball fan, and so is my dad. And so it's exciting to do this. I look forward to being able to recap some games that have happened, talk about what's up and coming. And the best part is there really isn't anything like this that exists right now
Nope.
in the world of Bradley basketball.
No, that's why I decided to do it, because I've actually done a little bit of research into what Bradley has to offer, and also just fan casts have to offer. And I believe there is a Missouri Valley Conference podcast that a lot of people talk about, but it's the conference as a whole. They don't really get into Bradley specifics. And one thing that I know about fandom in general is that when you care about your team or your school, you really care about it. And a lot of people just want to hear the echo chamber of things that they've been thinking that they can't tell their wife or they can't talk with anybody else. So that's kind of why we're here. So, Rick, this is your first time ever being on camera with us. And I called you off air, the OG of Bradley basketball. You did not know what that meant, but for everybody else who may not know, OG, original gangster, original geezer, whatever you want to call it. But you've been watching Bradley basketball for a long time. And I know I personally, and I'm sure people watching would love to hear your, life story about how Bradley came into your life and how it has been something that you've loved for almost your entire life.
Yep. Well, 1976, sophomore in high school. And during the winter breaks, students go home, band goes home, and I was in the band at one of our local high schools, and we were invited to come and play at Bradley games. And that was my first experience watching a Bradley game in the old Robertson Fieldhouse. Claim to fame is I watched us hold Larry Bird to 4 points. Didn't know a lot about basketball. That was in the day with no shot clock, no 3-point line. It was just mano a mano. And we've had some great players come through Bradley even before I became a fan. Learned all about them through reading materials, of course, and just really hearing other OGs come along and pass along the history. So I've been a fan ever since.
Now, Rick, let me ask you something. Be honest with me. You hate the 3-point line, don't you?
Oh, no, it makes the game exciting.
Oh, all right. I love it. Because when you bring up Larry Bird from the 70s, I assume, or at least most people who do, don't like the shot clock. They think the game is way too fast. It's ruining the game. So Just poking a little bit of fun at you. That's all.
Well, it went with the shot clock especially. What it did, it took away the 4 corners, the delay.
Yeah, the come and get it type
Yeah.
of deal away.
It took that away. Teams just get, you know, warned and then called for a technical if they didn't, and the refs would tell them if they were sitting back in the zone and they go back in 4 quarters, you didn't come up on, close enough to your opponent, with the ball, you'd be warned first, and then if you were warned the second time, you'd get a technical for it. But it eliminated all that. The shot clock did. So, it separates those who can from those who can't.
There you go. I like that. So, Brad, you obviously have a history with Bradley basketball. And for those of you who didn't put it together, Bradley, these two things actually have something in common. But
Yep.
you also are a big Bradley basketball fan. You've mentioned it many times here. So, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know briefly about what it means to you?
Yeah, so obviously, I feel like I always have to. Whenever I say I'm a Bradley fan, people ask, "Well, did you go to Bradley?" Well, no, I did not. Um, but I'm always like, me and my dad, huge Bradley fans. He named me Bradley because of Bradley basketball, like purely, and that's always been a part of my life. First game I ever went to, Dad took me to a game, December 4th, 1990, Chicago State. One of the few times Bradley has scored over 100 points, and at least like in my lifetime, I mean, it's happened a few times, but it's not. Bradley's had a lot of defensive coaches, so it has never been a common thing, at least through the coaches that I've lived through. And and that's where it all started. And then, and I always kind of like mock some of these promotional things that happen, but I got one of those little rubber basketballs at that game. You know what I mean? And it's like that just like had the B, and those of you who are listening that are Bradley fans will know this. It had the B with the feather and the headband around it, which is not allowed anymore, obviously. And that was just it's like it was a great experience. Bradley won. I got the ball, and that was it, right? Core memory. I mean, just with as much as I can sit there and tell you about it. I mean, I remember vividly like Chicago State, green and yellow, Bradley, red and white. And then I would say, we went to games, over the next, I mean, forever since then, but over the next 5 or 6 years, Coach Molinari came in, grew the program. And I would say the 95-96 season really, like I was hook, line, and sinker at that point. That was a team that got an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament, and there were some great, great games that season against big-time opponents. And um, Bradley won the regular season for the first, or that's the last time they'd won the regular season until last season. So, just that performance, that team just sucked me in, and I've been all in ever since for the most part through Coach Molinari, Coach Les, the dark Gino Ford years, and then now, Coach Wardle's kind of put Bradley back on the map a little bit. So, and then for me, right? So Dad names me Bradley, and our son is named Carver, right? And so unique name. Maybe it's weird. I named my kid after a building, but I'm also an Iowa wrestling fan. They wrestle in Carver Hawkeye Arena, so it's sort of tied to two different things, but they're two different places um, that mean something to me, and especially Carver Arena and Peoria. Like that is where I mean, I love sports of all kinds. I'm a huge sports fan, but Carver Arena in Peoria is where like that was my first experience of like falling in love with being a sports fan. And it's important to me. It's a special place for me, and it means something. And it's really cool to see things like the last game of last season with Drake, with the sellout, because there was a point in time where I really questioned if we'd ever see that again, because I grew up with that. I grew up with going to games regularly with 9 to 10,000 people, and to see kind of where it fell to. I mean, sports as a whole, attendance has dropped, live attendance, uh, but to see it, to know that that's still possible was really neat. And I know you and I had a conversation about that because there was a moment through that week leading up to that game where like I think you didn't realize, I think, for a moment why it was such a big deal. Like why it was so important to me or to us. And then as we talk more about it, I think you kind of got a little. I started to shed some light on like how special it was.
I forced
And
you to talk about it because you
yeah,
were like, "Nah,
you
nobody
did.
cares. We do a national show," and it's like that. Nobody cares, and it's like, well, people do care. Like the reason why it matters is because fans and like what you just described is not dissimilar from thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of fans all around the world probably have with whatever team it is that they feel very, very passionate about. And in America, with collegiate sports specifically, a lot of times these colleges, whether they're large or small, end up being almost like a professional team to these areas. And I think the smaller the town or the smaller the city, it matters even more. And I mean, I'm from Rhode Island, which is a very small state. There are two schools that anybody really cares about in terms of athletics, and it was University of Rhode Island, Providence College. And I don't know if you guys remember, but both teams made deep runs into the NCAA tournament in the 90s. I think Rhode Island lost to Stanford one year. Providence College lost to Arizona in 97. That was like what everybody was talking about. This was before Tom Brady, before breaking of curses. It's what mattered. So I could relate to it because everybody has that origin story about being a fan. And that's part of what makes fandom so great, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely it is. You're 100% right, and, it's just a special thing, and you said it, man, like, I think every Bradley fan especially has a story very similar to mine because there is a very rich history, um, and I hope that we get an opportunity as this grows for fans to come in through the chat or maybe even the opportunity to come on the show and share their story.
Yes.
And because it's just a special thing, to share because we've all had the same experiences, but they've been different for each of us individually. And to be able to kind of bring all that together would be a lot of fun, in my opinion. But
Yes.
um, as we move on into the current season, right? The Braves are currently 17-6, and I think it's important to acknowledge that 3 of those 6 losses were without one of their, if not the best player on the team, Connor Hickman, rolled an ankle against Indiana State, and I'm counting him as a part of that game, but then they dropped 3 straight games following that, and he was obviously back for the recent Indiana State game and has been back since, what, around the first of the year-ish,
Yeah.
right?
Well, a
And
little bit before the first year.
right, but, um
Christmas present.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the kind of the skid they went on, they were certainly shorthanded and were trying to figure some things out against some good opponents like Akron and Duquesne, um, even Cleveland State's solid, and trying to navigate those waters without sort of their general on the floor. And they've bounced back though. They've been on a run. They were on a winning streak until they dropped the game in Indiana State last week. But they've won 2 in a row since then. So things are looking really promising. Things are set up for, I wouldn't say that their fate is entirely in their hands. They're going to need some help if they want to win the league, but they're set up to put themselves in a really good position to at least be there if Indiana State does slip up. And at the very least,
Be
have the
seven.
2 or 3 seed in the tournament and be in a good position to um, win the tournament. And dare I say, um, maybe do what's necessary to put themselves at least on the periphery of the bubble if they don't win the tournament. Now, there's a lot of stuff that would have to happen to make that dream a reality, but I don't think it's completely outside of the realm of possibility.
Hey, Rick, are you surprised that this team is where they are, as successful as they were last year? And you know the attrition year to year can be quite a bit. You lose your best player, he transfers out. And was there a sense of realism as it comes to like, okay, if there's a little bit of a drop off, last season was so great, winning the conference outright in the regular season hadn't happened in forever, and then you come to this season and the team seems to be responding even after losing a great player, and now here they are, as Brad said, kind of their destiny is in their hands as long as they keep playing well.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised with the 5-game losing streak, but then when you lose, Connor Hickman for what was it, 4 games, 5 games, something like that.
Yeah,
That is hard, and when you're struggling with, having a deeper bench with guards, it makes it kinda tough. But no, the players we lost were interior guys, and we lost a great one in Rink Mast, and then the spark plug in Jay-Sean Henry we lost. And those are two virtually almost impossible players to replace. You just kind of fill the shoes and hope they, who comes in develops. And Daryl Hannah has just been outstanding this year. Plays a totally different game. We just do it differently than we did last year. And I think in many respects, we're actually better.
We definitely play the game faster. We played a faster pace than we played last year. We're not as we were a little more physical last year with Mast and Henry for sure. And Jashawn had that X factor. You could bring him in, and it's like he just changed the game instantly. And even last year, we missed him right for some stretches with
Yeah.
injuries, and
Yep.
you know it was noticeable when he wasn't there. And so we knew that would be a big loss. And that was the only departure that was like certain last year. Was we knew he wasn't going to be able to be
Yep.
back. Most people thought Mass was going to leave, I think, and go overseas and play pro. A lot of people were caught off guard when he decided to hit the portal and go to Nebraska. But I understand why he did. You know what? Like he gave Bradley everything he had. I have no hard feelings about him leaving. I'm rooting for him to be successful at Nebraska. He wanted to see how he stacked up against some of the best big men in the country, and
Day
you
in
know
and
what?
day
And
out.
he
Game
is
in
right.
and
Yeah,
game
yeah,
out.
like
Yeah.
every night, and you don't see
He's
that in the Valley. It's
Yep.
just the facts, and he's doing it. And so the departures were some concerns because those guys were really integral pieces. Like I think their leadership was the biggest question mark. Like, how are you going to replace the leadership? And because the veterans returning, at least from my perspective, did not appear to be like vocal leaders. Like Malavi Leon's a great player. He seems like a really super nice guy. He doesn't strike me as the type of guy that's going to like get in your face if you're not holding up your end of the bargain. Connor Hickman, you know, I think he's a coach's kid, so he's probably got a little bit of that in him, but I don't know. I mean, he's a leader, but he's more of still a lead by example guy. And I think because of the way that Brian Wardle coaches, I think Hickman exists as like a buffer between Wardle and the players. Like Wardle chews a kid out, Hickman comes up and puts his arm around him and says, "Hey, buddy, don't worry about it. Get the next one." That's that sort of thing.
He's like a
And,
translator.
yeah, I mean, really,
Yeah.
and that's what I think they missed them. I mean, outside of his obvious production, I think they really missed that when he was injured. Is that cushion, that buffer that existed between Wardle and the players with some of the interactions. They didn't have that guy that was going to come up and pat him on the butt and say, don't worry about that. Let's go." And so there were some questions I think about leadership, and I think even Coach Wardle like mentioned that coming into this season that he's mentioned, I think, several times that like the energy has had to come from the coaching staff a little bit, because it's not so much early on. It wasn't a player-led team, and so the coaches had to pick up that slack at times.
I think one of the, as far as player leader, might be a young man who started out the season. He's been with us for a couple of years now. Who's a walk on, Cade Harkey.
Oh, you're gonna get crucified.
No, in practices and such like that, he's very,
For those of us watching, don't
what
forget
I've
there's a
heard is
chat in the
very
comment
vocal.
section for that. So just go
Yeah.
ahead and
Yeah,
drop
I
that
mean,
anywhere. And
crucify me
continue.
all you want. I mean,
Yes.
but no, I mean, I've heard Wardle say many a time,
He's a glue guy.
yeah,
I
Hartke's
love
guy
that. I
sits
love
there,
that
if
phrase.
you're not in your spot, he's gonna get you there,
And that's one thing. Hey, and I'm not. He seems like a great kid, and he is. He's the type of kid you can put him on the floor. He's going to do exactly what he's supposed to do. He's going to be exactly where he's supposed to be. But at the Division I level, you cannot overcome the talent disparity. You know
Oh,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
that's just it, right? Like effort at the high school level at times, like effort can overcome the talent gap sometimes. At the Division I college level, like effort cannot close that gap.
Yeah, the higher you get, the talent
Yeah.
pool gets very, very deep.
Yeah.
100%. And that's nothing. That's not a knock against the kid, man. He's a
No.
great. And
Oh, no.
he's played meaningful minutes for them this year, and he's made some shots and stuff. But he can't guard anybody, and it's not because he
Yeah.
doesn't try really hard.
Yeah,
It's just he's outmatched.
I'm not
period.
gonna design a game-winning play for him.
I certainly
mean,
hope not. And,
Well,
like, Kevin said, that's Vidal there in the chat, talked about, yeah, had Bradley gotten one of those wins against Indiana State, I think that there's more of a conversation to be had, about an at-large bid. There's probably a path, but it's not. I mean, like I said, you're gonna have some crazy stuff that has to happen. Like, they're going
yes.
to have to you're gonna want Indiana State to win out from this point in time because that makes those losses more valuable, mean more, be better losses. Bradley's gonna have to essentially win out and lose to Indiana State in the tournament championship. But that winning out includes
Oh,
two wins over
well,
Drake to do that,
yeah.
still left to be had, and so
We would be in a discussion whether or not we'd get it or not.
well, and what you'd have to have happen is, like, let's say that in this league, if somebody other than Indiana State wins the tournament, that team is stealing a bid, right?
Yes.
Because
I was
in most cases, you would view this league as a one bid league, and rightfully so. And so you need the favorite in all these other mid major leagues to win.
You also
Um,
need favorites in the Power 5 too. Like, you can't have
yeah,
some random 17 and 17 team make a run and take
right, yeah.
what was rightfully like UNC or Duke space or something like that too.
Right, you've gotta have a minimal amount of, like, bid stealers, we'll call it
Yes.
that, to
Yeah.
set up
Chalk, rock
to
chalk.
set yeah, you need a lot of chalk to set things up for Bradley to even probably be in the conversation. Now that being said, though, like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that they win the tournament. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 season,
Mhm.
and, now granted, Bradley's gonna take care of business to get to the championship game when the time comes, uh, assuming they end up as a 2 or 3 seed where they'd be on the opposite side of the bracket. But, uh, once they get there, though, I mean, I don't I have no concerns about taking on Indiana State again. I mean, they're a beatable team. They're very good, and the style in which they play gives Bradley a lot of problems. They're very physical. They play fast, and they play really good defense. More so, I would say aggressive defense, which gives Bradley's guard some problems. And we can talk about that when we get into the review a little bit. But
That's a
you know,
perfect segue because when Brad and I went live last week talking some NFL football, we did it before the Indiana State game because Brad knew that he wasn't going to want to do a live show after a loss. That's exactly what you said. And that game ended up going, I think, a lot better than you anticipated. I mean, I think you anticipated that Bradley was going to play well, but you also knew that Indiana State's a good basketball team. And game went into overtime. The score doesn't really indicate how close it was. I think it was a 9-point loss in overtime. Really a great performance, right? But just ran out of gas at the end, and it is what it is. But I think personally that there's a lot to take away from it. I mean, a loss is a loss, but you stood toe to toe with what is considered the best team in the conference, and that is to bode well confidence wise as you get into these very, very important late season games. I mean, the games matter more now than they did in November.
you're right. I said going in, if Bradley went in and like just showed well, I would feel good about it. And then after they had the ball with a chance to win the game and then lost, I didn't feel so good about it.
They
And
baited you.
it's
They
weird.
baited you. They got you. You're like, I didn't want to care this much.
Yeah, and honestly, man, I feel like we mismanaged that last possession a little bit because Indiana State had a foul to give, and they had been guarding the ball aggressively the entire game. And so to think that we were gonna be able to bring the ball up and dribble it in the corner for 20 seconds until we could take a last second shot seemed. I mean, like I said, I'm not a basketball guy. I'm not an X's and O's guy, but that even seemed a little foolish to me, and I'm not taking any shots. As a former coach of not basketball, but other sports, I always assume that there are things that coaches know and understand that I don't know, and I'm sure that's the case here. But I don't think it's unfair to question it a little bit.
No.
And so that's where I'm at. I'm like, it just seems strange to me that that was the plan, considering the way the entire game had played up to that point in time. And then once we kind of got stuck in the corner, nobody came to help. There wasn't a screen.
Nope.
Another guard didn't come out to get the ball. Thank God they called a foul on the steal because, I mean, I wasn't so sure they were going to. Honestly, it seemed like kind of a late whistle. I might sound sometimes as delayed, so I can't tell. It always feels like a late whistle. Maybe it wasn't, but uh, but even then, what was it, 7 or 8 seconds, and freaking ESPN. jacked it up, and we
Yeah.
didn't even get to see the last possession. Like
We
they
had to watch
missed it.
replay
Yeah, they
later,
missed the last possession.
and I wasn't real thrilled with the play that
Yeah, I
was
mean, we got a
brought
shot
up.
up. We got a shot up, so that's all you can ask for. But Indiana State is one of those teams that they hit home runs in the transfer portal with Swope and Conwell at the guard position. They hit absolute home runs compared to the roster to bring in to um, complement the roster they already had in place. And that's the biggest thing. And the Valley's a guard league. It's a guard driven league. And their guards are better than our guards. Now, our guards play very well. Bradley's guards do
Yeah,
a
but
good job, but they are a little undersized, okay, which is the truth. They're a little turnover prone. And then when you put that against very athletic, talented guard play, um, it's a recipe for it could be a recipe for disaster. And it wasn't in that game. We found ways around it. But when it came time for the rubber to meet the road, and when the game was on the line, guard play is sort of what decided it. And that's despite, Duke Dean going off for 31, which was great. That's what kept Bradley in the game in the second half. Um,
He was on fire from three too. Like the whole team
I mean, he's
shot well
what's
from
he,
three.
5'10"? What is it?
5'8".
They list him as 5'8". He's probably not, probably 5'6", you know what I mean? Like, he's a little guy, and he's half blind in one of his eyes. He's born half blind in one eye. And that's what I always say is what we have to understand at Bradley, and I say this with all due respect as a passionate Bradley fan, is a mid-major school. You are sort of like it's a little bit the island of misfit toys. Like the players you get are gonna be um they're going to be flawed, right, in some area of their game. If Duke Dean was 5 inches taller, he would not be at Bradley.
Yeah, he'd be
You know what I
somewhere
mean?
else.
Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
I do.
and that's just the truth. Like if Duke Dean was 5 inches taller, he wouldn't be at Bradley. I mean, we could go down the list, through the roster and say if this guy was better at this, if this guy wasn't as bad at that. But that's the pool you have to draw from as a mid major. And I think it's been really impressive what Brian Wardle has been able to do with especially this roster because I mean we're not deep. We've got about four scholarship spots that are absolutely useless. Well, two for sure. And I guess if you add now they gave the walk-on scholarships and two players left. So let's just say solidly four scholarship positions that contribute zero for the most part. And so we're playing.
Practice players.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing what, 8 guys? And that's not
Yeah.
unusual, but I mean, we are especially the guard position, we are one injury, like serious injury away from being in deep, deep trouble. And I mean, and we saw that when Hickman went out in that 5-game stretch or whatever, like it made a big difference. And I don't know if it would matter if it was him or Duke Dean or Demarion Birch. I think if any of those three guys went down, like it would be detrimental. I mean, more so Hickman and Dean than Birch, but like Birch still especially if you get in foul trouble, it's nice to have him, and he brings an element to the game that our
Birch is
other
going to be a
guards.
special player.
Yeah, he brings an element to the game that our other guards or no one else on the roster has. He can attack the basket, create his own shot, get to the foul line, and we don't have anyone else that can do that consistently.
Plays a little out of control right now, but he's got an ability that you can't coach, can't teach it.
And I love that because I've always said this, that you can, a lot of the international players that Bradley has gotten, they're very skilled. They're very fundamental. They
Yes.
lack that dog, right?
I was
They
going to
just don't.
say, yeah. Their fundamentals are on point.
Yeah, but they
you
don't.
sometimes need guys to have imagination to get their own shots, make their own shots, right? It's like I don't need a guy who can do a great bounce pass every time. Like I need,
and he's a young man that averaged 27, 28 points a game in high school.
Yeah.
And to see some of the shots he puts up and they go in, I'm like, man, a lot of luck in that. But well, if he's averaged 20-some points a game in high school and he comes in, of course, obviously he's not going to average that in D1 basketball right now, but that's how he made all of his shots. Not
Hey,
all
man.
of them, but I mean,
Sure.
his nature of his game is he drives and he'll pull back off balance, throw up a heave, and it goes in.
Hey, ask Brock Purdy. Better to be lucky than be good. Let me tell you what, because he's in the Super Bowl right now.
No.
Well,
So, do you have any thoughts though on I mean, I kind of rambled a bit about the Indiana State game, but
No.
you had anything that you want to add?
Biggest thing I think, like Indiana State, the team itself, it's essentially 6 players. What's gonna hurt them, they're very good. Well, I'll say that, but they're very good. Um, when they play as a unit, the starting 5, they're like, all but unstoppable. You can stop them. I mean, Bradley played them to overtime. You can't there's no getting around that. We didn't get up 20 points this last game like we did the first time we played them. So we stayed right with them, and we had an opportunity to win it at the end. But the problem, what's going to happen? It's a long season. Excuse me, long season. We're coming down to the end of it, the last month. For 5 guys to play the minutes that they do, time they get to a championship game, even if they get the first round bye, they still got to play 2 games to make it into championship Sunday. There's going to be some tired legs. Bradley's got a little bit deeper bench. We're going to have some tired legs as well with our guard situation, but we're going to should be able to hang with them a little bit better if we meet them in the championship game. And I think our attitude at that point in time, experience, we're going to have, it's going to be like Bradley. I think you mentioned it earlier. Bradley and Drake last year. We had some younger guys, but Drake last year had 26, 27-year-olds who's been in this situation before,
I was actually going to make that
very
joke.
well
Weren't they all like
experienced.
29 years old?
Well, but we got older guys now, experience, and the scary thing is wait till next year.
Well, and that's just it. Like if things play out to where it ends up being Bradley and Indiana State in the tournament championship, and I know we're looking ahead a little bit, but I feel good about Bradley's chances because Indiana State's they don't have much of a bench. Like Dad said, they play 5 to 6 guys a lot, almost completely. I mean, both teams in that game, the Indiana State Bradley game, I think there was a total of like 4 or 6 bench points. I mean, it was next to nothing.
Really only one guy on the bench who's, as far as scoring ability,
Right.
that contributes.
Sure. And
Bledson,
yeah, and so
he beat us.
right, right. And that's what happens, right? But I'm saying like, to win 3 games in 3 days is hard for any team, especially a team that has no depth. And that's where I feel like I always feel good about Brian Wardle teams when it gets down to like uh, really gets down to the end of games, the end of matchups. It goes to overtime. I feel good about overtime because I always feel like we are more prepared for those situations than other teams. And when this game went to overtime, even though it was on the road, I felt good about it. I'm like, man, I felt like we were probably in better shape. We've played 2 other overtime games this season. This was Indiana State's first overtime game, and so I felt good about that. Obviously, it didn't go our way. You still got to make shots and do all those other things, but looking ahead to the tournament, to play 3 games in 3 days and to beat a team that was in the championship game last year that's got a handful of guys that went through that experience last year, 3 games in 3 days playing the championship game. Uh, that's not if I was Indiana State, I would want anybody but Bradley in that situation because of those factors. So looking forward to that. And maybe that's time we put a lid on Indiana State, move on and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the Northern Iowa game. So Northern Iowa came to town Wednesday. Ben Jacobson, most tenured coach in the Valley. He's been in Northern Iowa forever. I'm not even sure how long, honestly.
18 years, I
18
believe.
years.
Wow.
He's been at Northern Iowa. He just hit a milestone too recently, wasn't it? Was it wins?
Yes, he's now the Valley's
Leading,
or
like has the most wins in
has the
Valley
most
history,
wins
maybe?
in
Didn't
Valley
Northern Iowa
history.
have a big upset in the NCAA tournament like in the mid 2000s? Was it Northern Iowa?
They made a run. I want to say they made a run the same year that Bradley did in '06.
Yeah, because I remember being in college and they had that like fall away 3 that went in, and it was like kind of crazy. Was he the coach back then? If it was 18 years, so that probably was at the start of his
Um,
tenure.
If it was
Close,
'06,
very close,
it would have been
very,
real
very, very
close.
close.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, Northern Iowa's always been really solid. I mean, it's funny because in my childhood they weren't. I mean, remember when I first became a Bradley fan, they were not a factor. Um, and but then for the last decade plus, they've always been in the top of the league. And so they come to town, and no matter what their roster's like, what their record's like, because of how well coached they are, you're always concerned about that game. And you wanted to know how Bradley was going to bounce back off the Indiana State loss. And I felt like we came out sort of. I leaned over to Dad during the game, and I'm like, hey, like 2010. So Kevin says 2010. So 2010 was the year that you and I went on the run. But I said, hey, I feel like we're playing sort of in another gear a little bit. Like I felt like we came out and we were playing faster, more aggressive. I had some questions if we were going to be able to sustain it, which we didn't really. I mean, we kind of cooled off, and Northern Iowa got back in it a little bit, but we led wire to wire. Their perceived best player, Bowen Bourne, probably
He
the
was
most.
a
He
non-factor
was a
until
non-factor.
he still got 16,
He
16
got
points.
16, but a very quiet 16 that didn't matter. Probably the most hated player in the league. He is an expert flopper. I mean, the dude's 5'11", little scrawny white kid,
Like
and
Caitlin Clark?
he's just a pest, man. Like is what he
Definitely.
is, and I think most people would describe him as that. He's a pest. I mean, in my opinion, me and yours opinion, he's the most hated player in the
There's
league. Next to
well,
maybe like Enright, maybe he might
Enright
be there
Enright
with Drake.
and Bowen Bourne is 2 young men that I would just like to
And they're like
give
David
an open
Eckstein.
hand slap right to the
They're like
face.
David Eckstein when he played for the
Oh,
Cardinals, right? Like,
man.
you love him if
Yes.
he's on your team, but if he's not, he's just so
Yeah.
pesky that it drives you crazy.
Yeah, he fouls off like
Yeah,
17 pitches in a row.
Yes.
you can't deny what Bowen Bourne has done at Iowa, Northern Iowa. You know, I mean, dude's a sharpshooter, and
When he gets
he's
hot, yeah, he gets red.
yeah, he's put in some shots that you know, and then that's coming off the heels of AJ Green, you know, who couldn't miss.
But he couldn't play defense, but that didn't
Yeah,
matter though.
yeah, that's
So anyways, we got a win, right? Connor Hickman had a good night. I mean, we got contributions everywhere. And what's really interesting is like traditionally under Wardle, Bradley has been a defensive team. And this year's different because we're scoring a lot of points. I bet our average has got to be up 10 or 15 points over the last few years.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it feels like that for sure. The concerns are on the defensive end, but I
I
wonder.
think we're still
Well, I asked the question though. I'm like,
point-wise.
do you think that we are giving up more points because I feel like we're playing faster. I feel like we play the game at a little higher pace, which is obviously going to create more possessions for the other team. And naturally they're going to score more points.
You see that in the
And
NBA a lot these days.
yeah,
Teams
yeah,
play really
Yeah.
fast and they score fast break, lots of three-pointers, quick shots on the shot clock type of thing. So it's
Well,
not uncommon to see that now.
we hold teams. I mean, especially in the first half, we come out. And seems like that's how we do it. You know, it's that teams gain more on us in the second half.
it's almost like we get out coached a little bit at half in the sense of like the defensively on our defensive end. It's like they figure some things out. Some not all the time, but like today was a perfect example. Like we were up by what 20 or close to 20 at halftime, and they came out and
Yeah.
closed the gap. I
We
feel like
were up.
that's
Yeah. In the second half, we were up 23, 25 points, something like that, and still only won by 13. But still,
and some of that may be complacency, right? Because like you get a big
Yeah.
lead, and
Well-
it's human nature. You're going to go into cruise
well,
control
I
a little
think
bit.
I don't even know if that's the case. I think when teams get desperate, especially teams that are growing like
Oh yeah, they're not overthinking; they're just chucking it up.
they're just coming down and you know they've got the element of luck, you know, and they're just throwing up freaking prayers and they're going in, you know, and that seems to
But
be
if
something that's hit Bradley a lot.
don't you ever,
People,
I swear to God, I have never seen, like literally in my lifetime, I feel like everybody that plays Bradley is like the luckiest team ever. Like I've seen some of the most impossible shots, impossible, well guarded 3-pointers go in
nothing but net.
in my 10 years as a Bradley fan. And like I said, I don't watch a lot of other college basketball outside of Bradley or any basketball, like I said earlier. But my goodness, man, like, and luckily, like lately it's been better, but for years, like there was always a complaint because, Bradley plays in an arena in downtown Peoria. It's off campus. The complaint is, well, they don't get to practice there very often. They're not used to the background. But I'm like, neither are the visitors. You know what I mean? But it's like we would get outshot in our arena
Yeah.
often. But I'm like, I didn't think it was a reasonable excuse because they were, the other team doesn't get to practice there either. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's just basketball. And but yeah, I feel like I've just seen like some crazy shots go in that we just never make. And maybe it's just looking at it through, red colored lenses, maybe, but um it's just kind of funny how that plays out. And even I do feel like, coach kind of loses his mind once in a while, even at well
Well, I
guarded
was
well
losing my
guarded
mind.
shots going in.
I was losing my mind early in the game today.
Yeah, well, actually, speaking of that, so moving on, Northern Iowa's big win, and then you get, what is it, the Battle of I-74, right? Illinois
Yeah.
State,
Yeah, so
the Redbirds.
so it was always known as the War on 74, and then after 9/11, when we went to real war,
They
um,
changed it.
they decided that maybe it was a little insensitive, and it's really hard for me because that's what I grew up with to like. And then it was with I-74 rivalry, maybe is kind of what it's officially called now. But anyway,
Well,
yeah, I mean, we're
well,
talking
they
about.
call what I see the Flyers on X, formerly known as Twitter, had
Just call it Musk.
Battle for 74. This is not a battle for
Yeah,
74.
we
That'd
own the
actually be better.
interstate.
That would be
We're,
We
great.
own the
I
interstate.
mean, we're on 74, they're on 74, and neither team's going to walk away with 74. So,
That'd be great, actually, if they just like rename the highway for whoever. If any
oh
team
yeah,
sweeps, they just
the
call it the
That'd be
Illinois
great.
State Redbird Highway. Yeah,
Braves
just not mess it.
motorway.
Braves, whatever. It is fantastic. It's a great rivalry, and like I told you, like it was the 95-96 season. Like Bradley and Illinois State, they were vying for the regular season title that year, and that's the year that really like pulled me in. And so it's always been such a heat. And the schools are separated by less than
40,
30 miles
35,
ish,
40 miles.
and I think they're the closest of anyone in the league. Maybe UIC and Valpo might be closer now, but
Nope.
that's no.
Nope.
Okay, so closest of anyone in the league, I believe, and a long time rivalry. And I do want to read this comment here. So Cooper says we get a lot of baskets off of weird deflections and even off some poor passes that get deflected and leave the defense out of position, and we get the ball to an
Yeah,
open
he's
guy
right.
who gets a shot. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And yeah, quicker teams break down some of our guys easily off the dribble, so we have to recover a lot. Which, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, part of why ISU had a chance to cut the lead is, yeah, that's part of why ISU had a chance to cut the lead, but we're so dynamic that we can cover. Yeah, we're very athletic. We're very long, and I think that helps
Our length.
tremendously. Our
Our
length
length hurts a
is
lot
our
of
biggest
teams.
asset because I got to imagine where you may think that you have a passing lane or a lane to drive, visually may be there, but the second you go to do it, it disappears because of our length and our athleticism. And that's something that hasn't been the case in the past. Now we've been a little more physical where like, you might have to consider the fact that you're going to get physically contested at the basket if you want to take it there, where that's not so much the case this year, unfortunately. Now we got some guys that'll block some shots, but like,
But we can't have Davis and Birch flying directly at a
yeah,
3-point shooter.
no, yeah, we fouled more 3-point shooters the last few weeks in like the history of basketball, but um, it's
Can we get the intern to fact check that?
it's got to be close, man. Like it's just been insane how many 3-point shooters we fouled. But and it's really it's just because the damn rule, like because none of them have been agreed. I mean, maybe one of them was, but like for the most part, they haven't been egregious. But like it's that whole like you got to give the guy space to land, like that's the deal. And I get that it's probably a safety thing, but these guys, they're pros, man. Like they kick their leg out, they kick their leg out, they
Oh,
make a little
absolutely.
contact, and it's just like the softest foul ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's like
And again, I feel like it's one that never goes our way, like ever, and that's what blows me away.
Starting to sound like a Cowboys fan. Watch it.
Well, and I'll say this though, I feel like we've been better about it recently, but we don't take contested threes. Like we got guys that hell they'll be wide open and they don't shoot it. Let alone when they're covered. I mean, I feel like I said recently, last few games we've had a little bit more to us in terms of willing to take those shots in a little tighter of a window. Like today, Connor Hickman hit a great step back off a screen where he was fairly well covered. And we've seen more of that here lately, but we've also seen plenty of guys be wide open and pump fake or pass up a shot, and that drives me crazy too. But And we don't play to contact very well, and that goes back to what we talked about earlier with there's just not the physicality that you'd like to see.
That comes from our foreign players, I think,
Yeah,
more than
and
anything.
I guess you just gotta take the good with the bad with those guys, right? You get the technique and the fundamentals. You're lacking a little bit on the play to contact side, and that's the nature of the beast, I suppose.
Why do you think
But
that is?
I
I think
don't
I think, like,
just
the
a different
overseas game
style of game.
the overseas games, kids are brought up and they just, I don't necessarily think they play necessarily as physical. They may have practices harder because I think who was it? I don't remember which one it was came in early in the year and they were doing some drills or something like that and said, "Oh, this is nothing, compared to what they were used to." And I'm like, "Okay."
Hmm.
I don't know what your guys' drills were, but
Yeah, I mean, I think we play a little faster, a little more physical, obviously not as fundamental, which, I don't I mean, as a country, not as fundamental. I mean, we've seen it, right? Like I actually watched the Redeem Team documentary on Netflix last night. So I feel like a lot of this stuff is like fresh in my mind about kind of having to adapt the way that we play the game at the international level in order to compete because it is different. And okay, Jonah, you know what's hilarious about that is several years ago, there Bradley was playing someone on national TV, and the commentators referred to Bradley as being in Indiana. But they are certainly in Peoria, Illinois, and but that's what was funny is that they referred to them as being in Indiana, which is great. But great question. So yeah, and in ISU, the ISU comments that Cooper made were in reference to, yeah, we have two ISUs. We have Illinois State and Indiana State. So, and, the fans, we refer to them as ISU Red and ISU Blue that we have. So, um,
Which as I accidentally did with my background colors here. I did
there
not
you go,
realize
red
that
and
was going to be
blue.
a
I
thing.
mean,
Yeah.
so,
Whoops. Sorry.
no, that's all good. Well, Bradley's red, so we'll take it. So, anyways, the Braves got the win today over, and that's one thing with Illinois State. You can throw the records out the window. Like three of the last outside of today, I think three of the last four matchups have been single digits. No matter what the record. I mean, Bradley's been the better team the last few years, like record wise and standings, but it's just an important game. We've talked about it on other shows when we refer to college football or whatever else. There's certain rivalries that it's just throw the records out. Let's see what happens.
Military academies. We say that with the service academies all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't
Yep.
matter.
and I think, like, stay on Illinois or yeah, Illinois State for just a little bit. One of the things I think, like today's game, maybe some people thought it was just going to be more of a clash, instead of us going out to 20 some point lead and pretty much coasting to a double digit win. But uh, for the people of Illinois State who might be here, but I doubt it, be patient. You guys are going to be coming around. You've already reached your number of wins from last year total. And there's still many games to be played, and plenty of chances.
And coach is only a second year there, right?
Yeah, Coach Pedden's only in his second year. He's brought in some players. They're just not up to code. Let's say that, not up to par with everything else, but they're getting there. As far as the rivalry, I mean, you got a new coach. I don't think he necessarily gets it, completely. He can't have the full fill. The players, I don't know how
Well,
many.
it hasn't been much of a rivalry, like standings wise. I mean, it is geographically, but the last couple of years. Now we went to overtime in Peoria last year. Then we went down there and took care of business. But there hasn't been just because of the disparity in the
Yeah,
standings. If you weren't from the rivalry and you just came in last year, it
yeah,
likely doesn't feel like a
yeah.
rivalry
It'll take
for you.
it'll take a year or two for some of the guys, and the transfer portal, they're going to get it rolling back again, especially in mid major. In my opinion, this is my own personal opinion. Everything is cyclical. It'll
Oh, for
come
sure.
around.
For sure. Especially in a conference like that.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Well,
And I've seen Drake, scraping the bottom of the conference for years before they started getting good. And then they're on a side, and they're going to be going on a down cycle again at some point
well, yeah,
here
because
in the next few
DeVries
years.
will get hired because his son's a senior now at Drake, and so he's probably more willing to move on now than maybe he has been the last few years. I guarantee you he's gotten opportunities
Yeah.
to move on the last few years, but he probably stayed because his son. Now, I mean, he probably could have taken his son with him wherever he went, but yeah, and that's just
Yeah.
it. Most of these jobs in this league are stepping stone type jobs, and there's nothing
Yep.
wrong with that, man. There's
No,
nothing at all wrong with that, and that's the trouble. And yeah, I know we talked about how long Ben Jacobson has been in Northern Iowa, which is great. And if you could get a Brian Wardle to stay here for 20 years, fantastic.
isn't that probably
Um,
just a personal
That
choice on his
yeah,
account
I
though?
think
Like he
so,
probably.
likes it
but
there, right?
he seems to. I mean, he's from
Yeah.
Chicago. His kids are in school, which I mean, every coach has kids that are in school, so I don't know that that's a barrier.
Well,
Really, you're a coach's kid, you kind of know what comes with that. But um, I think that for him to move up, it takes a very special fit because he's just a different kind of coach. He's a very tough coach to play
yeah.
for, in my opinion, and he couldn't walk into one of these Power 5 schools that's got one and done type players
Oh
and
yeah,
succeed, right? I mean,
Yep.
just because he seems very system driven, and it's like, hey, like you have to fit into his system. Like
my way or the highway.
he does
Yeah.
not play to the egos at all. And except for his own maybe, and I like him a lot. I'm going to preface by saying that I have no problem with Brian Wardle. I mean, as far as what he's doing as a coach here at Bradley, but I think that optically you can look and you can make your own opinion about what it might be like to play for him. I don't think he's easy to play for, and I think that and I think he knows that, and he would have to find the right fit. He would not leave for just a job that's gonna pay him more.
Sure,
I don't think that would happen, so,
Rick, what were you gonna
that's
say?
Yeah. Well, on a bigger picture of things, because I love the Missouri Valley. It's a very good mid-major conference, outstanding. And I think what's going to make us even stronger as a conference is for good coaches to hang around like Ben Jacobson has. 15 years, 20 years, as long as you possibly can. Can you imagine what the Valley would actually be like with Ben Jacobson, Brian Wardle, Josh Schertz, um, well, a couple of the new guys. I think
the guy at Belmont does a nice job.
the guy at Belmont,
Casey, what is it, Casey Alexander's, I think?
Cole down at Murray State. If these coaches stay, because I think basketball, D1 basketball across the country, I mean, you still got the power conferences that are still plugging away, but I think a lot of mid-major teams, look at the Mountain West as an example. Parity. Parity's starting to come to all of college basketball, slowly but surely, and it's getting there. And you got the transfer portal, and you've got, I mean, look at the Valley transfers that are in the Big Ten now, and look at those teams with the Missouri Valley Conference transfer, and the record of those teams versus the record of the teams that doesn't have a Missouri Valley Conference
Yeah,
transfer.
where's Ryan Leskis? Illinois' best player is a transfer from Southern Illinois, Marcus Dabask. So,
Well,
like,
you know
where's he
what?
at?
When I'm listening to you guys talk about this, right, about coaches, it makes me think of the Big East of old. How the Big East used to have all of those coaches: Jim Calhoun, Jim Boeheim, right? Like they did the Requiem for the Big East
Mhm.
and 30 for 30, and the the Valley could kind of be something like that if, as you said, these guys stay behind. But a good example of what you're talking about, Rick, in terms of the national landscape and parity. I mean, just look at Connecticut. I know Connecticut is defending national champion, number one team in the country right now. But when Jim Calhoun left, they were on a downturn and they were
Yep.
pretty much nothing for a while. And on the other side of that, the men's team rises up and Gino Auriemma, who had an absolute just Nick Saban like dominance over the
Right.
sport, is now facing. I actually asked my aunt the other day about him. I'm like, how much of an appetite does he have for this current
Yeah.
paradigm of college basketball? Because he can't just recruit on, hey, banners. Doesn't work that way anymore.
Nope.
You got to show the money. You got to show a lot of different things now. I like that. Brad and I both agree that parity in college sports is the best because it's more entertaining for me. Maybe some people don't like it because their team was at the top or whatever. And I know that like a purist, like of people that we know, like Budge doesn't like the way that college football is going, but I like the parity. I
Yeah.
personally do. And I feel like that's why we watch sport. Like, it's not as fun. I mean, the Chiefs are fine, but like nobody wants to see them every single year. And so if a conference like the Valley could keep this momentum, then
Mhm.
if major college basketball breaks off, this is the new Big East now, right? Like that's the way
Yeah.
I see it. And we did have a question here about Bradley
Saw
ever
that.
moving to a bigger conference, and in the short term, I think the answer is no.
Oh,
But the
I think
landscape
in
of
the long term, with
So,
Bradley, no.
all right. So this is my opinion on
Yeah.
that. So, I think you're going to get a lot of different answers from different fans from the Valley, even different Bradley fans on this. And the primary conference that has always been tossed out there over years is the A10, and I don't. I mean, because St. Louis is in the A10. I mean, it's sort of a geographical fit ish, and it's a basketball first league, basketball only league. I think. I don't think they even play
Well,
football in the A10,
it
but like,
it used to be the one of the sticklers. Peoria's not in the media market, and
which isn't relevant
argue
anymore
yeah,
with
arguably,
streaming.
if that's still an
look at
excuse
us.
or a reason,
Exactly.
Peoria, Central Illinois area is in worse
The media
a
market's not a
worse
thing anymore,
yeah.
though, because
Not as much.
you
I
can
mean, I think in
find
professional sports it is, but in college
yeah,
sports, I don't.
Oh,
you
I don't
can
think it matters
find
because
any
now you can
game.
cover. Like I could
Yeah,
oh,
cover
yeah,
Bradley basketball from here and never step foot in Carver Arena
yeah.
and
right.
Hey,
probably be fine.
I back when I was driving the truck, being the Bradley fan I am, and even was then, I was out driving the truck and Bradley game I know was coming on, and I'm sitting there trying on an AM radio trying to if I was anywhere within a couple 100 miles of Peoria, trying to get it. Occasionally I could. I actually, one time,
This is great.
called WMBD radio and said, "Hey, can I get an update on the score of the Bradley game?" They said, "Hang on, we're gonna put you on hold, and you just listen to it, okay?" I said, "Hey, appreciate," because I explained the situation. I listened to an entire half of basketball on my cell phone,
On hold.
on hold, listening to the Bradley game. Dedication, folks. I
That's
I
awesome.
love my Bradley
But also
Braves,
that's Peoria, man. Like, that's Peoria and that's Bradley. It's like
you know?
you call 1470 and you're like, "Hey, man, like, I'm a truck driver on the road, big Bradley fan. Like, give me the game." And they're
And
like,
that was even back when, Coach Stoll was the color guy.
"Yeah." And,
So, I mean, I had a treat. I mean, you had Dave Snell in his prime and Coach Stoll with all his color and stories, and it was great.
um,
That is excellent.
so let me
S
talk more real quick about the conference thing. So,
yes, go ahead.
um, so I think the pipe dream for Bradley is the Big East, just because they fit based off the fact that it is a private school that is a basketball focused school without football. Now, I think UConn might be the only school in the Big East that plays Division One football.
Possible.
I believe. And so
Stand
like
by.
and even like geographically with Creighton, Marquette, DePaul, Butler, Xavier. I mean, like they fit geographically. Now the
Yeah, they do.
difference though, when you start talking about Omaha, Nebraska, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Peoria, Chicago, Peoria doesn't fit in that sense. But again, like we talk about, I mean, like let's look at DePaul. DePaul is in the gutter right now. And they're in Chicago and they're in the gutter. And I think, I mean, if you could ask the Big East right now, hey, like if at this moment, if you ask the commissioner, like, hey, like if you had the ability to trade Bradley for DePaul at this instant for the rest of the season, would you do it? You know, they probably would, just because it's a better program, it's a better product right now. But it's I'm very interested to see one like football is going to control everything. So we'll see what happens with big time football and if there is a split off at some point because basketball is going to be affected by it inevitably. But I I don't know. I don't know that it's so much Bradley as much as it is Peoria that would hold Bradley back
It's
from moving
possible,
to a
but the
bigger
thing is,
league.
man, money drives a lot.
Yeah, and Bradley's
And
got one of the healthiest NILs in the conference. I mean, they're in a
right.
very good position. Home of the Brave does a great job, and uh, yeah, they're in a very good spot as far as that goes. And I think that attendance wise, we were in second on average attendance by Southern Illinois, but it was a very like it was about
No,
like
it was like
50
it
people
was
or something.
less than yeah, it was
It was a
probably less
minuscule
than
amount,
75.
and Wardle's got to be one of the, if not the highest paid coach in the league, real
Yeah, I think
close.
so, and he just signed an extension
So
into
I mean, the money
28,
now
29.
now Bradley also publicly here locally has expressed that they came out about cutting a lot of staff, like faculty positions, which has caused a riff of like, why don't you cut from athletics sort of thing. But I mean, but I mean, basketball is the university's identity. Unfortunately for you academics, like basketball is that's the front porch of Bradley University. That's the curb appeal, and if you're not investing in that, you're dying, in my opinion.
That's a good answer. And I think, like you said, Rick, I mean, people probably don't want it long term. They probably don't want it, but we didn't see a lot of the stuff coming for football. So who the hell
Yep.
knows? But let's take a look ahead to this week's game, slate of games for the old Braves. So they have two games, I believe, on the road against Evansville and a big game at home against Drake. So I think that one winnable game, obviously another game that could be tough, but it's a home game. You always like that. What makes me nervous about having the Evansville game first? Are you looking ahead to Drake, right? Some of these things can creep into a team. But how do you guys feel about the slate of games coming up, especially off of two big, pretty solid wins?
I feel like Brian Wardle does a really good job at like taking care of those psychological things, like looking ahead.
Keeping the kids
Yeah,
focused.
Yeah.
I don't expect that to be an issue. Um, Evansville is returning. They've gotten a player back recently. They were without with what's his name again? Dad, you know his name.
And Hummerkaus.
Okay, so like, and they had a similar record with him and without him, like Bradley had with and without Hickman. Um, when they had him, they ran off a lot of wins, and without him, they struggled. He's back.
He played
He wasn't with Evansville when they came to Peoria, and that was a game that we controlled for the most part. But now we're going on the road. It's always tough to win on the road in the Valley, and now they got their best player back. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I don't think the looking forward thing is something I'm worried about. But my biggest concern, and this showed itself today, is we haven't shown the ability to be able to put people away, to put inferior teams away. We let them hang around, and when you let them hang around, there's always a chance, and today's game, I mean, I never was nervous at any point in time, but a couple more threes fall and it gets real interesting. Yeah, and
yeah,
so
for a team that doesn't shoot the 3 very well, they shot it well today, and that's even going in, I said, "Watch, this is gonna be a day that they're just gonna be lights out," and they didn't start out that way, but they ended hitting
yeah, so
50%.
and what's funny is as there's actually two teams in the league, Matt, that you probably aren't aware of that have Bradley transfers. So Indiana State has one, and Jason Kent, who transferred there from Bradley, and Antonio Thomas has one, or Evansville has one in Antonio Thomas. Now he didn't go straight to Evansville. I think he went. Did he go JUCO and then
Uh,
to Evans, or did he just go to like a D2 or just lower level
D2 or
D1?
something like that, I think
But
down
yeah,
in
he there was somewhere in
Tennessee or
between.
Kentucky.
And what's crazy is that dude couldn't make a bucket at Bradley to save his life, and what's he averaging there? Do you know? I mean,
Not sure what
he's had
averaging,
a
but
really good season. He's been a solid scorer for them,
yeah.
and
Revenge game?
and well, when they came to Peoria, he didn't get it done. So I mean that would have been the time to do
Yeah.
it. But anyways, I mean it's a game Bradley should win, right?
It's
If Bradley is who we all think they are, this game should be a win. It's
it
Okay.
solidly in
it
the win
yeah,
column.
it should be a double-digit win. If we had to worry, it's that, okay, because 'cause we're defending conference champs.
You're gonna
We're
get everybody's best
Bradley.
shot.
We're gonna get everything they can throw at us, I'm sure, and with Ben Hummerkaus back, even he played today, but they played Valparaiso, even though it was on the road,
It was close.
they just barely got by.
Roger Powell, though, dude, he's got Valparaiso doing some good
He's
things.
yes.
Their problem right now is just their roster isn't very good. Um, he's got them moving in the right direction, and
Cyclical
again,
nature.
it'll be
Yeah,
interesting to see
yeah.
how long a guy like him sticks around, though, the guy played at Illinois. He was on the Illinois team that went to the national championship against North Carolina. I imagine that in his mind, he envisions himself coaching at the highest level of college basketball at some point in time. So I imagine if he gets things rolling at Valpo, he probably won't be around for long, unfortunately, because it'd be good for the league. Because Valparaiso, since they brought them into the league, has been a perennial bottom feeder for the most part. They're the least funded program in the conference. They play in a glorified high school gym. I mean, there's a lot of things to not like about Valparaiso being part of the conference, but winning would cover up a lot of that, right? If they could be good and competitive, and I think he'll get them there. I just don't know if he'll stay there long enough to really have like a meaningful impact.
Winning covers up a lot, though. But the Drake game is important, guys, because it, I think, is going to affect seeding in the conference tournament, right? Because Drake is kind of right
Oh,
up there with Bradley, Indiana State. So you guys need this win big time. So this
yeah.
is
Well,
one
if
got to have.
if they win, I think they got Southern
Are we
Wednesday.
currently tied
We are
Yeah,
for
I think so.
second?
currently tied for second with Drake. We win, we take care of business Wednesday. They got a home game, and I believe it's against Southern, which could be a tough one for them.
That's a tougher matchup than us going to Evansville, I would argue.
I don't know, but I'm one. I don't think Drake's not the same team that they were last year. I mean, they've got some good, good stuff. I mean, and they played today with hobbled um,
Tucker DeVries.
Tucker DeVries. He got hurt early and he came back out. Came after he went in the locker room, came back out. I said, "You're playing?" He was hobbling. You
He
could
could
tell
barely
when he was.
walk, yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's kind of nuts. But then he ended up going off, and I don't know what he scored
He's
point
really
wise,
good.
but
What
yeah,
what scares me the most about Drake, I'm not so worried. It might sound crazy that I'm not worried so much about Tucker DeVries because I feel like Malavai can keep him in check a little bit. And whatever, he's going to get his. He's going to find a way to
yeah,
get his.
it's going to be
Darnell
Brody.
Brody is what terrifies me because he is built like a middle linebacker, and we don't have anyone that can physically match up with him. Like Darius Hannah is a good player. He's very athletic, but he's a small. I mean, he is. I feel like visibly he's going to appear as like half the size of Darnell Brody, like width wise, and uh, I mean he's going to push us around in the post. I mean, if you put Meta in there, like
If
there's all
Meta
sorts of problems that come along with that. I mean,
if Meta had a mean streak in his mind to play tough, that he Brody might have some trouble. But I don't think I don't. That's not
eh,
that I don't think I know. Unfortunately, Meta is not strong enough. I mean, he's got the size, weight, height, all that good stuff to go up against a Brody, but he just doesn't have a
so
mean streak
and
to bully back.
Matt, to give you some context, Ahmet Jonovic, everybody calls him Meta.
Which I
He
think of Ron Artest, by the way, when you say
Yeah,
that.
right. Meta world peace. He
Who did have
plays
a
like
mean streak, by the way.
he's out there for world peace sometimes. He they brought him in from Serbia last year, like at semester, because
Mhm.
they had somebody left at semester. They brought him, he's 7-footer in from Serbia. Physically, he is a large human being. And occasionally he shows glimpses of like
Being
being
a
really good
good big
at
man,
times,
but
but he struggles to catch the ball at times. He's not, for being 7 feet tall, he's not a great rebounder at all. Um, if he has to leave his feet, it just gets weird at that point in time. I mean, again, to talk
N-
about what we said earlier,
Not ideal for a basketball player.
If you're coming to Bradley, like yes, you see 7 foot thick guy and you think guy's a basketball player, but he's flawed, of course, just like anyone else that's going to come here. They're going to be flawed in some area of their game. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in Peoria. Um, and it's and he's only a sophomore, eligibility wise, and so he is. He doesn't appear to be very athletic.
yep,
That's a good point. And now he's got a pretty sweet shot. I'll give him that. I mean, if he could play it physical enough to get himself to the free throw line, like I mean, because he can just sit there and shoot free throws all day long. I mean, he's got a pretty sweet shot for a big guy. Got some good touch. He just, again, it's like his what you see visually and the physicality he plays with, those things, they just don't mesh. And again, we could go back to the international thing and all that stuff, but like there's a lot of development that needs to happen there
Yep.
if he's going to be a regular contributor
Strength, footwork.
at this level. And he's
Everything.
really physically, he's the only option.
Well, the next closest would be Kyle Thomas.
Yeah, but I mean, and yeah, Kyle Thomas, the Eastern Illinois transfer, early in the year he was solidly in Wardle's doghouse and didn't play at all. He's gotten on the floor recently, but he shows flashes on offense. He's had some blocks on defense, but some of them have been like he gets beat and trails the guy on blocks. So it's been like blocks because you made a mistake, types of things. I I I, I don't know. I think I'd rather roll with him. I think there's more upside with Kyle Thomas than there is with
Thomas more athletic.
Meta. He's more athletic. He fits more with the team we have on the floor and how we play the game right now. And that's just my opinion. But yeah, that's what scares me the most. I don't know how we're going to be able to handle Darnell Brody at all. Just because of how physical he is. I mean, and you could watch some games or whatever, some highlights if you want to. The dude is he's just a thick guy, and he's athletic, and he's just good, man. He's really good, and he's really physical. And last year we had Brink Mass last year. We even had Jay Sean Henry we could throw in. Now Jay Sean wasn't there height wise, but he played the game. I always thought he played basketball like a fullback, and so you had a couple of those bigger bodies you could put in there and match him physically, and those dudes just aren't on the roster this year. So that's what scares me the most about Drake.
They're the closest thing to spark plug, I think, if you watch some of the rebounds from Hickman today.
But Hickman ain't guarding Brody.
No. Hey, the way they switch off the screens, don't be
Well,
surprised.
he'll probably
if he
have to
doesn't
guard
get
him
in
at
there.
some point, but on accident.
I mean, hey, watch out! 'Cause I've seen for whatever reason, I've seen Duke Dean have to guard the biggest guy on the other team's
Sure.
center, and
So,
I'm like, ugh.
But yeah, I mean, obviously Drake's going to come in. Last night against Peoria, they got beat in a meaningful game that led to Bradley winning the conference. So, I mean, and really they're playing to keep themselves up there at the top a little bit. So, it's equally important to both teams. And
You want to stay on the other side of the bracket.
yeah, I mean, and both teams
Well,
should, because the separation between the top three and everyone else just seems to continue growing. Which is good for Bradley because there's really not much of a difference between 2 and 3, because you're going to get the bye, and you won't have to play on Friday, which is beneficial. And I mean, I guess the 2 seed will get the 12-5 was that? No, they'll get the 7-10, and then so they'll get the winner of the 7-10, and the 3 seed will get the 6-11. I believe.
I just saw it the other day,
So,
I can't remember.
I mean, whatever. I mean, it's
But
there's not much of a
way
difference.
it's looking right now, regardless, well, either way, the optimum thing for us to do is
Win.
beat Drake twice if it's possible, at least once next Saturday, and hope they get a loss somewhere else, which is very possible. Because, like I said, they're not the same team they were last year. They're similar to Indiana State in only having X amount of guys. That's their bread and butter, which is actually less than Indiana State. They only got 3 guys. I think that's their bread and butter. But
Well,
couple
Enright,
guys,
DeVries,
couple
and
guys.
Brody are their main
Well, they got
guys.
another guy that can, but you got to keep him in check. But if we end up second, our hope is we'll end up playing whoever beats anybody in the 3rd seed.
Yeah, and I have a hard time
on Saturday.
We talked during earlier the Drake Indiana State games on. I'm like, who do we want to win this game? I mean, because it's like, what's better for Bradley? But then it comes the conversation of, are we talking about just within the league? Because within the league, it's better if Drake wins, because that closes the gap. That adds another loss in Indiana State. Bradley still has 2 against Drake. But then it's like, again, pipe dream, but you start thinking about the at-large possibilities, and you're like, well, you will kind of want – it's probably best for Bradley if Indiana State wins out and Bradley gets a crack at him in the championship game, and if it doesn't go well, if Bradley takes care of their business, at least until that point,
Mhm.
maybe
You're
they
in the
put themselves
discussion.
in a position to be in the conversation. And you know
But
what? At the very least, maybe you get yourself an at-large to the NIT, which I think would be considered
and here's
acceptable.
part of why I say you're seriously in that discussion is because years past, the Valley as a whole has been like the 13th, 14th. I think maybe last year it was the 15th ranked conference. Right now, we're like number 9. Last I'd seen and
Right.
heard in the net, and that's pretty
So
good.
what am I guessing? What the power? What in basketball they say power 6 because the Big East, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
after that, I'm guessing you have the A10 and what the Mountain West maybe,
I thought
and then it'd be Bradley, and then
I
it'd be the
almost want
Valley.
to say the Mountain West was behind. I think they may be ahead of us now, but the Mountain West is a very
Well, and
tough.
Utah State's number. What was Utah State numbers? They're ranked number 17. Bradley beat them. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
one thing that's
But
really
they
helped
lost today to an unranked
to
team.
San Diego State.
But
But
yeah, it was San Diego State.
one thing that helps even like make the at-large conversation a possibility is that Bradley played probably the best they've played in the non-conference in a long time, and then the league as a whole played really well in the non-conference, so that just boosts everyone else's rating. And because right now in the net, there's what through I know for sure Indiana State, Drake, and Bradley are because Bradley's 64 in the net, and Drake and Indiana State's
Yeah.
like 24. Drake's in the 50s. Bradley's 64. There might be another team in the top 100
Oh,
or close.
they've both fallen off.
So, but these other teams did well in the non-conference, which has kind of set everyone else up for success a little bit, which has been nice. So, at the end of the day, though, right, you got to go take care of your own business and just see where the chips fall. And yeah, we don't want to look past Evansville, but if Bradley wants to put themselves in any position, even to compete for a league championship, you got to get it done against Drake at
Yeah.
home.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, big week coming up for Bradley. This is our first episode. I think it was a rousing success. I think we talked about a lot of good stuff. Next week, hopefully, we'll come back with a little bit of post game. It'll be some combination. It'll either be the two of them over there, it'll be the three of us. Who knows? But we'll be here to bring you back with Braves Talk next week. So, guys, do you have anything else closing you want to say to the few remaining people who are sticking around to watch us?
Yeah, obviously, moving forward, there will be less like general conversation about the Valley, I guess, and history because we've gotten it all out there now,
Yeah.
right? So moving
Unless y'all want that.
right. But yeah, moving forward, it'll probably be more pointed conversation towards like the actual like recent games, what's happening right now. And I mean, sure, we'll refer maybe back to the
We can get into
archives if something applies.
great moves and calls by coach or some of us might not like Meta getting the ball at the top of the key ever
Oh, we had that
without a
debate
guard coming to
earlier.
take it away from him.
I just
That's
said
ridiculous.
yeah, we had that argument in the living room earlier today. I just said, I go, man, like every offense in America has
I don't care
the
if it
five
is,
come out to the top of the key to take the ball and like set up screen and roll to the basket. I
but
don't
how
even
many bigs get the ball and try and dribble to the basket?
apparently
We've
I'm
seen
at Yonovic.
Rink Mass do it a few times, but he's capable.
Sure,
Sorry,
but
but Meta's not.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
man. Well,
you're
that's a
finally coming around. You've been like the president of his fan club here for a while, but
Well, I like his upside, but he needs to do what he has to do to get there.
yeah. Well, you got anything to tell everybody before we wrap this up?
He just
Yep.
told them. That's what we have to do with
Yep.
this
Yep.
podcast. We have to get everything ready, get everything up to the standards that we're meeting. So really, this pod is just like Meta. That's what I'm hearing.
Yep. Yep. Let's get out to the games if you're out there. Need more
Yes.
people, more what do
Dad'll
we
be
call it?
available to sign autographs.
I was going to
AIS.
say next week,
Next
the OG Bradley podcast with Rick Powell will be debuting live on YouTube for 6 hours as he regales us all about all of his Bradley past. So hopefully, as we go along, as Brad said, we'll add some new things here. One of the things we'd like to do is to do some live call-ins to have people give their, I mean, I would say unadulterated opinion, but their raw opinion about the game within reason, of course. Maybe keep some of the, inappropriate stuff out of there. But we're going to build up to that. So just be a little bit patient with us as we get up to speed on all this, as Brad and his dad kind of get their own rhythm. But if you have an opinion or if you want to just say that this was all terrible, the number at the bottom of the screen, 703-718-6314, is the way to do that. They come to my personal phone, so you'll be sending them to me, and I will make sure to let the boys know everything that you all have to say. So I'm going to say this for them, but from me, from Brad, from Rick, hope everybody enjoyed it this week. Hope this finds everybody well and safe as always. And gentlemen, we'll see you next week. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on I&C Sports are those of Matt Freites, Brad Powell, and their guests, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. I&C Sports is exclusively owned by Matt Freites and Brad Powell and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.